This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a creative disagreement. This was betrayal. For decades, Willie Nelson carried an image the world believed without question. The calm outlaw, the peaceful rebel, the man who smiled through everything. Fans thought Willie got along with everyone, that he never held grudges, that he forgave easily. That story was convenient, and it was false. At 92, Willie Nelson finally stopped protecting people who never protected him. He stopped softening the truth. And for the first time in his life, he did something unthinkable. He named names. 7 artists, 7 industry insiders, 7 people the public adored, but Willie never forgot. These weren't random rivalries. These were moments where trust was broken, where loyalty vanished, where people Willie stood beside quietly stabbed him in the back. And the reason this revelation matters now is simple. Willie stayed silent for decades, not because he was weak, but because the industry punishes anyone who speaks too early. Now, at 92, there was nothing left they could take from him. And once you hear the names on Willie Nelson's list, you'll realize this wasn't about hate. It was about survival. The music industry sold you a clean story about Willie Nelson, that he was universally loved, that everyone respected him, that the outlaw movement was one big family. That was the lie. Behind closed doors, Willie Nelson was used, not celebrated, praised in public, dismissed in private. Executives laughed at his sound. Labels told him he was too strange. Artists borrowed his style, his writing, his attitude, then turned around and acted like he didn't matter. This wasn't brotherhood. This was quiet humiliation. Willie watched people rise using pieces of what he built. He watched others take credit while he absorbed the risk. And when things went wrong, he was the one left standing alone. What hurt most wasn't the criticism. It was the silence. Rooms went quiet when his name came up. Calls stopped getting returned. Friends suddenly became busy. And Willie noticed something important early on. The industry doesn't attack you loudly. It isolates you. No public fight. No headline feud. Just doors closing when you're not looking. That's how resentment grows. That's how grudges form. Not from one big explosion, but from years of watching people smile to your face while slowly cutting you out behind your back. Willie didn't explode. He didn't clap back. He didn't expose anyone. He waited because he understood something most artists don't learn until it's too late. In this industry, the loudest betrayals are rarely spoken out loud. The first name on Willie Nelson's list hurt more than the rest. Not because of fame, not because of money, but because this man was never supposed to be an enemy. That name was Waylon Jennings. For years, the world saw them as brothers, outlaws together, standing on the same stages, selling the same image of loyalty and rebellion. Willie trusted Waylon Jennings, defended him, backed him when others didn't, and that's why the betrayal cut so deep. Behind Willie's back, deals were made. Credits quietly shifted. Royalties didn't line up anymore. At first, Willie believed it had to be a mistake, something that could be fixed with a conversation. That conversation never came. Instead, Waylon Jennings avoided him. Calls went unanswered. Meetings were postponed. And silence took the place of honesty. That's when Willie realized the truth. He hadn't been overlooked. He had been sold out. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't business chaos. This was a deliberate choice, protecting one legacy by quietly damaging another. What made it unforgivable wasn't the money. It was the lack of respect. The way Waylon Jennings smiled in public, then disappeared in private. No apology, no explanation, no accountability, just distance. That was the moment Willie stopped calling him a brother and silently added Waylon Jennings to a list he never planned to reveal. A list built on betrayal and remembered for decades. The next 2 names on Willie Nelson's list weren't loud enemies. They were something worse. They smiled. They praised him in public. And they worked against him in private. The first of those names was Chris Christopherson. On the surface, Chris Christopherson looked like an ally, a poet, a thinker, a man who benefited from the same outlaw image Willie helped build. But behind the scenes, tension grew. As Willie's influence expanded, so did the jealousy. Industry rooms started shifting. Credits leaned one way. Opportunities quietly leaned another. Willie noticed something early. When decisions were being made, Chris Christopherson was suddenly always in the room. And Willie wasn't. No confrontation. No honesty. Just subtle moves that slowly pushed Willie to the side. Then came the second name, Johnny Cash. That name alone split fans instantly. Because Johnny Cash wasn't just an artist. He was an icon. And publicly, he stood for loyalty and brotherhood. But privately, Willie felt something change. Support became conditional. Praise turned selective. And moments where Cash could have stood up for Willie, he didn't. To Willie, that silence mattered. Not because Johnny Cash attacked him, but because he chose not to defend him when it counted. This wasn't open warfare. This was quiet betrayal. No headlines. No public feud. Just doors closing slowly. One by one. Two men, two respected names, and two relationships that never recovered. Because in Willie's world, betrayal didn't have to be loud to be permanent. This next name wasn't about contracts. It wasn't about credits. It wasn't even about ego. It was about abandonment. That name was Merle Haggard. When Willie Nelson was under pressure, real pressure, financial chaos, tax problems, the weight of an industry turning cold, he expected at least one thing from the people closest to him. A call, a check-in, some sign of loyalty. From Merle Haggard, he got nothing. No public support, no private reach out, no moment of solidarity. And that silence hit harder than any insult. Willie didn't expect Merle Haggard to fix his problems. He didn't expect money. He didn't expect favors. He expected presence. Instead, Merle Haggard stayed quiet, protecting his own position while Willie absorbed the damage alone. In Willie's mind, that choice mattered. Because loyalty isn't proven when things are easy. It's proven when standing beside someone might cost you something. To Willie, this wasn't neutrality. It was choosing safety over friendship. And once that line was crossed, it couldn't be uncrossed. No argument followed. No explosive fallout. Just a quiet understanding that something had permanently broken. That's how Merle Haggard ended up on Willie's list. Not as an enemy, but as someone who disappeared when it mattered most. This name didn't hurt because of money. It hurt because of hypocrisy. That name was David Allan Coe. Publicly, David Allan Coe talked about outlaw unity, brotherhood, respect for the pioneers who came before him. Privately, Willie saw something else. Songs that sounded familiar, stories that weren't his to tell, an image built on rebellion Willie helped carve without the acknowledgement. To Willie, this wasn't inspiration. It was credit theft wrapped in outlaw branding. What crossed the line wasn't imitation. Artists borrow all the time. It was the refusal to give respect. The way David Allan Coe leaned into the outlaw image, while quietly distancing himself from the people who built it. When Willie noticed interviews change, credits disappear, and narratives shift, he understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was positioning. Building a legacy by stepping on someone else's shadow and hoping no one noticed. Willie noticed. And once that respect was gone, there was no reason to pretend otherwise. That's how David Allan Coe landed on the list. Not because he was loud, but because he took and never looked back. The last two names on Willie Nelson's list were the ones he knew would explode the conversation. Because these weren't just artists. They were icons. The first of those names was George Jones. To the public, George Jones was untouchable. A legend, a voice everyone bowed to, and Willie respected that talent. But respect doesn't erase resentment. From Willie's point of view, George Jones benefited from the same outlaw wave, the same industry doors, without ever standing beside him when it mattered. Moments came when Willie felt support should have been public, clear, undeniable. Instead, it stayed quiet. No defense, no backing, just distance. Then came the final name, the one Willie knew would split fans down the middle. Dolly Parton. Yes, Dolly Parton. Not because of cruelty, not because of open conflict, but because, in Willie's eyes, she chose the industry's comfort over the outlaw family that helped lift her. Willie believed Dolly Parton knew when to stay neutral, and when neutrality protected power instead of people. To him, that choice mattered, because silence, again, became the pattern. Two legends, two respected names, and two relationships Willie believed never returned to what they once were. No screaming matches, no public feuds, just the kind of disappointment that doesn't fade, because it never gets resolved. People asked the same question the moment Willie spoke up. Why now? Why wait decades? From Willie's point of view, the answer was simple. Because the industry punishes truth when it's told too early. When you're young, you're replaceable. When you're successful, you're controlled. And when you're honest, at the wrong time, you're erased. Willie understood that long before most artists do. Speaking out back then would have meant closed doors, radio silence, tours drying up, friends turning into liabilities. So he did what survivors do. He stayed quiet. He watched. He remembered. He let careers rise. Let myths harden. Let public stories become permanent. Not because he forgave, but because he knew timing was everything. By the time Willie reached his 90s, the power had shifted. Contracts were irrelevant. Approval no longer mattered. And fear had nothing left to take from him. This wasn't anger boiling over. It was a decision. A controlled one. He didn't speak to settle scores. He spoke because silence had already done enough damage. And at 92, Willie knew something the industry couldn't stop anymore. The truth doesn't need permission. It just needs the right moment. By the time Willie Nelson revealed the names, some people misunderstood the point. They thought this was revenge. They thought it was bitterness. They thought it was an old man reopening wounds that should have stayed buried. From Willie's perspective, that wasn't true. This list wasn't about destroying anyone's legacy. Those careers were already cemented. Those names were already untouchable. This was about telling the truth while he still could. Every name on that list represented a moment. Willie learned a hard lesson. That talent doesn't guarantee loyalty. That shared stages don't create trust. And that the industry rewards silence more than honesty. He wanted younger artists to hear what no one told him. That the smiles aren't always real. That alliances expire. And that the people who benefit from your work won't always stand beside you when it counts. Willie wasn't asking fans to hate these people. He wasn't asking for sides to be taken. He was doing something far more dangerous. He was breaking the illusion. Because once the illusion is gone, you stop romanticizing the industry and start protecting yourself. This list wasn't closure. It was a warning. And warnings rarely come wrapped in comfort. Willie Nelson spent his life preaching peace. Forgiveness, letting things go. But peace never meant forgetting who crossed the line. At 92, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't attack anyone publicly. He did something far more unsettling. He told the truth calmly. The same industry that benefited from his silence now had to sit with his honesty. Those names weren't shouted. They were stated. And that made them impossible to ignore. This wasn't about hate for the sake of hate. It was about survival, about the cost of loyalty in a business that rarely returns it. The smile you believed in at the beginning of this story? It was real, but so were the wounds behind it. and Willie carried both without explanation for decades. Until now, who do you think crossed the line the worst? And was Willie right to finally say it out loud? This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, remembered quietly, and revealed at the very end. In the next story, we dive into the silent war between Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, the feud they never admitted, but never escaped.